15. Just to remind members, except members of the public, to make sure their mobile phones are switched off. And this note of the meeting may be recorded and subsequently made available to the public for listening purposes. Could I have the Sederunt, please?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, we have 12 members present today, so we are quorate. We have apologies from Councillor McGregor and Councillor Gilroy. Thank you.
Have we got any declarations of interest?
Apologies for Councillor Ogilvie as well. He's got this flu thing that's going around.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. With regard to item 10, the applicant is known to me, but I would not consider the relationship so close that I couldn't remain and discuss that item.
Thanks, Jim. Anyone else? No. Three minutes of the application committee on the 16th of December 2014, sorry, 26th of January 2015. Could I ask the clerk to outline the procedures to be followed?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, the Planning Applications Committee will consider each application in turn as detailed on the agenda. The case officer or other appointed officer will make a short presentation addressing the determinant issues accompanied by digital images. Any late information, amendments or corrections will be reported at this time. Members may ask questions of officers following the presentation on points of clarification. The Chairman has been provided with a list of eligible representatives who have registered to speak at this meeting within the period specified in Council policy. No other persons will be allowed to speak. The Chairman will individually invite those who have registered in advance to speak to make their presentation, after which they may be questioned by committee members. No questions may be asked of members. The order of eligible parties being heard will be as follows: third parties objecting to an application, third parties supporting an application, statutory consultees objecting to an application, elected members of Dumfries and Galloway Council who are not members of the Planning Applications Committee, and applicants or their agents. Representatives have been placed in alphabetical order, and a copy of the public speaking list is available from the committee officer taking notes of our proceedings. Presentations will be strictly limited to 3 minutes per person, except for national and major developments, which by their very nature are more complex, where the time limit will be 5 minutes. The Chairman of the committee will ask you to come to a conclusion if you take too long. Representatives are encouraged to use the time allocated to clarify any points they consider material and address the determining issues. Certain matters are not normally material planning considerations and will not be taken into account by the Council when deciding on a planning application. Representatives should not raise any new matters without explaining why they were not raised earlier with the case officer. Please do not repeat what is in the report, as members will have already read the report. After all the representations have been heard, the meeting is then in formal session and no members of the public may address the committee from the public gallery. The Planning Applications Committee will then proceed to determine the application. Thank you.
Thanks, Gillian. We're going to go on to item 4 on the agenda, the change of use of land for formation of 10 chalet stances, siting of 10 chalets, installation of septic tank and soakway system, and formation of an access road retrospective at Barstobrick, Ringford, Castle Douglas. Reference number 13-P/2/0040. Dean Clapworthy to go through the.
Okay, thank you. If members could just see the location plan on page 7 of the agenda papers. There's a relationship between this application and an application that this committee dealt with last month. And you can see that relationship on that location plan. This current proposal is the area, if you like, to the left or south of the site that was dealt with at last month's committee and approved, subject to some conditions. It's partially retrospective in the sense that the access tracks have been implemented and the stances, although not completed necessarily across the whole site. Just to take you through the slides now. That's the application site. It's 1.4 kilometres north of the village of Ringford. It relates to an elevated plateau that's quite significantly vegetated on the south, east and eastern side. That's, if you like, a zoom-in image of the site. It's outlined in red. You can see the relationship, how it's related to the caravans to the top right. They were the one, that's the site that was approved last month by this committee. There is history of this where there was a previous proposal that was approved in 2008, and there is some overlap between this current site and the site that was approved in 2008, and it generally relates to the northern section of this part of the site outlined in red. There's 4 different caravan types, generally on the same theme. They're sort of slightly stretched out, but the generally from the same portfolio from the same provider. Timber-clad, shallow pitched roof. As you can see, the sort of longer and shorter versions of the same thing, and they all constitute caravans. And there are no caravans on the site presently, so any caravan that will be on the site will be based on these 4 types. That's just an example of some of the plots across the site, and what it does, it demonstrates and indicates that the plots can take one of the caravans plus parking for a couple of vehicles as well. That's the bin enclosure serving the whole of the site. This would serve both the previous phase that's already been approved and the current phase. That's an example of lighting under the canopy that lights up the deck of the caravans. Now, these are images provided with the submission, just as a demonstration of the inconspicuousness, if you like, from certain positions of the site. That's looking up towards the site from Queen's Hill. The site relates to the ridge there on the horizon. You can see how trees extend above the ridge and serve to obscure the actual topography. This is a position north of Ringford on the public road. The site relates to the ridge you can see sort of left and centre on the horizon. This is just on the edge of Ringford, the northern edge of Ringford. The site is there on the horizon. You can see the trees and vegetation shooting above the actual slope. And this is a view from the A75 to the southeast of the site. It's the centre ridge there in that view. And this is from a position on a public footpath to the southeast of the site, looking up towards the vegetated ridge. This is from Nielsen's monument that has been mentioned in some of the objections. This is looking towards the site about 1 kilometre away, and the yellow arrow is pointing to it. Phase 1 is just slightly to the left of the arrow, and the caravans are in amongst the darker vegetation there, obviously picked out from the snow. And this is an image across towards the site from the north, or from a minor public road at a similar elevation, just demonstrating the level of vegetation and the inconspicuousness of the site. Now, this is within the site. I'm in a just slightly elevated position, looking at the access track, passing the site, serving phase 1, and also going from left to right into the site. And this is panning right, looking into the core of this site. You can see the level of gorse cover and the trees there on the right that are at the upper slope as it drops steeply down to Queen's Hill And these are just example plots. You can see some of them not quite finished. There's some more work to be done there just to finish the surfacing. These plots are actually the ones that relate to the easternmost edge. These are the nearest the edge as it drops steeply down to Queen's Hill. And you can see the level of vegetation down to the right there, obscuring the site. This is the track that runs and serves those plots that are along the eastern edge. And then we've got some views south back towards the A75 in Ringford. These are just slight, if you like, gaps or in the gorse where you can gain intermittent views. And then this is plot 15. You can see the enclosure that's formed by the trees. And again, this is one of the other plots along the eastern edge. And that's just about it. The application is recommended for approval subject to the conditions set out in the report.
Thanks, Dean. Members, clarification? Councillor Maitland.
Just as a matter of interest, who is it who retains control of the vegetation?
On the site, it's the applicant. So generally the gorse cover, I'm not 100% sure. The trees that are out with the site, the trees that you saw on many of the images on the eastern slope, they're out with the actual red edge site. I'm not sure who actually controls, or the applicant is down to speak and he might be able to clarify that matter.
Any other members? Right, thanks. As we've got nobody wishing to speak from the objectors, we've got the applicant, Robin Austin. Please. Right, Robin, you've got 3 minutes. I'll let you know 30 seconds to go.
Thanks, ladies and gentlemen. No objectors have turned up today, so I probably don't need to say too much. So, this is the second phase of lodge development at Barstobrick Ridge, and it's integral to the overall diversified business on the site. Not only will it bring more people and the spending power to Dumfries and Galloway, but it will also augment the income of the other enterprises that we have on Barstobrick. The new stickety-lickety tea room opening in the visitor centre in April will get more custom from people coming to this site. Horse liveries, pony treks and lessons at the equestrian centre, fishing on the ponds and farm tours around the farm are all set to benefit from increased customer numbers. These stances and roads for this development were constructed at the same time as stage 1. And the reason that we did this is because of the proximity of this site to the first site. We didn't want occupiers in the first site to feel inconvenienced by a building site right next to them. So we went ahead and created the stances and roads at the same time. All of the stances and the roads were built to the same criteria that were set out for the construction of stage 1. To conclude, I would ask you to confirm the recommendation of the Planning Authority by granting this consent. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Robin. As I say, I think Councillor Maitland had asked about the maintenance of the gorse bushes, etc. Can you any comment on that?
Yes, well, it's one of the conditions of the consent that we don't reduce the density of gorse bushes on the site, and we're quite happy to comply with that.
Any other member? Jim?
Thank you, Chair. Could I ask about the trees to the southeast of the site? Are they in your ownership, Mr. Austin?
Yes.
And you have are you committed to retaining the trees?
Yes, that whole banking was felled something like 8 years ago, 10 years ago, something like that, and it has been replanted, and these larger trees were left as part of the ongoing forest. So we've no intention to cut any of them down.
Councillor Maitland?
Thank you. Yes, I was absolutely aware that the gorse coverage was part of the conditioning, but there are other types of vegetation there. There are natural regeneration of I think, indigenous species, and everybody likes views. We all know what happens. I just want to be absolutely clear that it is entirely within the applicant's powers and therefore within our ability to say here that somebody, let us say, on the edge who would like a view out south and southwest is not in a position to cut down and therefore make the development much more exposed. So we certainly mentioned gorse, but gorse is only part and parcel of what's up there.
I mean, there's no intention to cut down trees. They provide some cover. The only thing would be if there was something that was of danger. There is one tree that if it fell down, it could fall in a lodge, and it may be that would have to be looked at from a health and safety perspective. But other than that, we've no reason to be cutting down trees.
Any other member? Any other members? Thank you.
Thank you.
Members, we're now in session.
Short shrift, Chair, we just go with the recommendations.
Councillor Geddes?
I would support that, sir.
Any members otherwise?
Thank you, Chair. Just to confirm that the application has been approved subject to the conditions detailed in the report. Thank you.
We move on to item 5 on the agenda, the installation of 2 roller shutter doors and steel cladding over the lower side elevation and retrospective permission for temporary siting a storage container, amended description at Huntingdon Garage, St Mary's Industrial Estate, Dumfries, reference number 14/P/3/0599. And we've got Jessica Taylor to go through the drawings.
Thank you. So the application site is outlined, I'm saying red, it's black. The site is accessed off Huntingdon Road, however it is clustered with St Mary's Industrial Estate. To the east of the site are residential properties, and to the west are commercial and a mixture of commercial and industrial buildings. So the application seeks planning permission for the installation of 2 external doors, cladding to match the existing to the north elevation, and the temporary siting of a container to the rear. And so you can see we're looking at the 2 doors on the right hand side of the front elevation, the cladding on the north at the bottom, and the container to the rear. This photograph is taken from the road. It shows the front elevation of the garage. The smaller door in the far of the picture to the right is proposed to be increased in size, and then there's a further door to be located to the right of that. And just a close-up, so it shows the location of the 2 proposed doors. One of the doors has been installed. Internally, it's a full-size door. We just haven't removed the cladding yet, which is quite small. Okay, show that the cladding hasn't been removed yet. This is a photograph showing the north elevation where the proposed cladding is to be installed. And this is showing the container, which is already sited, taken from the neighbouring site. So that's the rear of the garage. And this one is taken from the neighbouring site at the rear of the garage, showing the container. I would draw members' attention to paragraph 1.3 of the in the background section of the report. The sentence should read, "The existing workshop has 4 existing doors and not 3." it has been brought to officer's attention that there is a potential discrepancy with the red line boundary submitted for this application. It has been alleged by one of the objectors that the applicant may not own some of the land identified within the southern end of the application site, and accordingly that the ownership certificate on the application form may be incorrect. The issue has been raised with the applicant's agent, who has confirmed that the land between the electricity substation and the existing fence is owned by the applicant. The application site boundary, as submitted, accords with those in an application submitted in 1999 for the site. The developments which are seeking planning permission as part of this application and are not located within and do not affect this area. Matters regarding land ownership do not fall within the remit of the council as planning authority. The alleged discrepancy has been raised with the applicant and a response has been received, so it has to be accepted in good faith that appropriate certificates on the application form have been completed correctly. Officers are therefore satisfied that the application is competent and can be considered and determined by the committee today. As detailed in the report, the application site is an existing commercial garage, and officers do not consider that the proposed alterations to the building will impact on the amenity of the neighbouring residential properties to a greater degree than currently exists. Parking for the garage is located to the front of the building within the forecourt. None of the alterations proposed will impact on the ability to use this parking, and with the doors open or closed, vehicles will still be able to use the forecourt as present. It's considered that the proposal accords with the local development plan policies and is recommended for approval subject to the condition detailed in paragraph 5.1 of the report.
Thanks, Jessica. Members, points of clarification? Ivor.
Chair, it's just, why don't we take into consideration that, according to one of the objections, previous planning conditions are ignored? Surely we put them there for a reason. Why do we ignore them? Because we're not taking it into consideration today.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, and if you have a look at paragraph 412, that addresses that issue. The matters are being investigated. However, that's a separate operational matter which is ongoing. It is not related to the application which is before the committee today.
Member?
Thank you, Chair. It's just a couple of points of clarification. It mentions, and it's maybe just a technical thing, the address is actually on Huntingdon Road, is that right? So we should take that as being the correct address, even though the application we can accept with the sort of incorrect address.
Yeah, I think in 4.15 of the report, they submitted the application as St Mary's Industrial Estate, so that's what we've taken as application. As I've said there, the neighbour notification was carried out correctly and all the properties on Huntingdon Road were consulted.
Ewan.
Thank you. And just on another point, you were showing the cladding yet to be removed from the roller door that had been done internally. Is that just to determine what's actually retrospective in this application? The storage containers clarified as being retrospective, but is that retrospective now as well, or could you explain that, please?
The works have been ongoing as the application has been assessed. So the door has been installed internally. Internally, when you're inside, it's a full door. Externally, it's just part of the cladding has been removed to show part of the door. So yes, it's partially retrospective.
Any other member? Right, thanks. We've got one objector wishing to speak. Robert Hamilton, please. You've got 3 minutes, Mr. Hamilton. I'll let you know 30 seconds to go.
Before I start, Mr. Chairman, I'd just like to say that I hadn't realised that there was a loop system on, so I wasn't hearing what Claire Kirk was saying until nearly finished. So there's a lot of what you said I don't know. I didn't pick up. Sorry. Okay. Right. On first looking at this application, it would seem to be an open and shut case. Most people realise that the title plan issued from the Land Registry Office for your property shows exactly what is registered as yours. Land out with this property you do not own. I have personal experience of this. The title plan for Huntingdon Garage shows that some land being used by the garage to the south of the workshop is not on that title plan, but is somehow included in the block plan in the planning application. In 1.3, the committee has been informed that there are already 4 existing roller doors, but there are 4, but not 3, as in the report. The investigation by the Council's enforcement team into reported breaches of conditions attached to previous permissions is very much welcomed by the residents of both Huntingdon Road and Victoria Terrace, and any request for assistance will be readily given. These previous conditions include that there be 3 parking spaces within the site for each bay and 1 for every 2 members of staff. This equates to 14, plus those spaces required for MOT vehicles, car sales and visitors. The planning application states that there are some 16 places on the site. How does this add up? The area which is not registered to Huntingdon Garage represents some 30% of the total area presently used both for long and short-term parking outside the workshop, but within the site of the shown in the application plan. In 413, contrary to the report, only a few of the parking bays to the north of the site would continue to be available if vehicles are to gain access to the proposed 5th big bay. Granting permission for this 5th bay for delivery, which was already about 90% completed pre-application, will increase the requirement for parking. There is not sufficient parking on the site as it is at the moment, and there will be a lot less with the loss of the already mentioned area. The immediate result of this will be that the residents of Huntingdon Road and Victoria Terrace will be further aggrieved with an increase in vehicles associated with the garage constantly being parked on the pavements, on the double yellow lines, and even further up the road than at present. No consideration is given for residents or pedestrians. Please consider these points carefully. Since the day the business landed in Huntingdon Road in 1999, it was too big for these premises and has constantly
30
taken
seconds,
over
Mr.
any
Hamilton.
space in the street that was not seriously challenged to accommodate the large number of vehicles that are associated with the garage. Some of these sit for a considerable time on Huntingdon Road. Trusting that you agree that there is no more room for parking within this site, and therefore withhold approval of this application for the sake of most of the people in the area. Thank you.
Thank you. Could you remain there, Mr. Hamilton?
Sorry.
No one. That's fine, Mr. Hamilton. We've got the agent wishing to speak. Catherine Elliott, please. Thank you, Catherine. You'll have 3 minutes when you start, and I'll let you know 30 seconds to go.
Thank you. The report is comprehensive, so I'll just highlight a couple of points. This is a proposal for alterations to a building to improve the use of the space available, to provide better disabled access, and to improve security to the building, especially the office area. It will enable removal of temporary structures and give improved space for works on vehicles to be carried out inside the building. These proposals for alterations will not increase the potential for the alleged activities that are of concern to neighbours, and as such, I would contend that there are no planning grounds for refusal of this application. I've looked at the comments submitted by neighbouring residents, and whilst they may not like living near to a garage, the applicant has planning permission to operate as a garage there and has done so for the last 15 years. It is an industrial estate where noise, activity, traffic, deliveries, lights, etc. are all inevitable. It is unfortunate, but the juxtaposition of land uses is a fact of life here, and the applicant is entitled to operate his business here. The applicant has had no trouble relating to parking with police over the years, and the road is a public highway where residents and businesses have a right to park. The applicant maintains that as far as possible, vehicles associated with his business park within the premises, and that many of the cars parked on the road belong to local residents and other businesses, some parked for long periods. And I'm happy to answer any questions that members may have. Thank you.
Members?
With regard to the two doors and the space in behind them, is this for additional business that will be taking part, and what sort of operations will be taking part behind those two doors? Is it general servicing? Is it bodywork repairs, etc.?
The proposal is to reorganise the internal space so that the office is better located at one end of the building, and the far end security door, the far end roller shutter door, is actually a security door, the one that's not been installed yet. So there will be office space behind that door, but it will be a roller shutter door for security. The door that's partly installed at the moment will be for better access to the inside of the building for general servicing activity that currently goes on within the garage.
Either.
So what you're saying is you're actually moving the opportunities for more noise to come out of the building by having an additional door further along the street in front of the actual residences. Because when you've got a door open, if we were to put or ask, like during servicing time, whenever the business is open, that those doors were maintained shut other than taking cars in and out of the business to reduce noise levels, because one of the comments are the noise levels. Would that be something that would be acceptable to the applicant?
I think as long as it was practical to get the vehicles in and out of the building, so we'd obviously have to keep opening and shutting the doors while the vehicles were brought in and out. If that would make members more comfortable with what's proposed, then I'm sure the applicant would consider that.
Jane?
Well, I'm just slightly confused, and it goes along with what Councillor Hislop was really saying, is that there is a suggestion, and I think you said this, if I got this wrong, there is no increase in activity. Can I be absolutely certain that you're suggesting there is no increase in activity proposed as a result of this change to the building?
The proposal is intended to make better use of the space that's there, so to accommodate the business that currently goes on in a more efficient and effective way.
Any other member? Tom?
Yeah, I think if you look at the plan, it's not very well highlighted up there. It says stores delivery bay at that other the fourth roller shutter door. So therefore, if it's a store's delivery bay, it could be kept shut when it's not in use. It's not a service bay. It doesn't say that there. It says it's a store's delivery bay. So therefore, if that is usage of that roller shutter, you could put that in as a condition that that be kept closed. You know?
It's
For delivery, it's for
we need to be
deliveries.
voluntary, Tom. Can you make it a condition?
But it's certainly not a service bay. That's what it says there.
Any other member? Thank you, Catherine. Thanks. Members are now in session. Chair.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like this committee to consider actually deferring this application until we actually establish whether the operator has been breaching conditions of the original planning. I don't know whether it's competent or not, but I'd move that.
As I said before, that's actually a separate operational matter which is different to what the committee is actually considering today, so I would strongly suggest that you don't do that, because they're things that are running in parallel but are mutually exclusive.
Jane?
Well, Chairman, I would suggest that there is absolutely no reason why we should not grant this. Clearly, things have been suggested that are out with the remit of this committee, which must be dealt with. Parking, all the issues that have been suggested can be dealt with in a different place. Noise, everything, and enforcement. There is no reason at all why we should not grant this application as it is, and allow the business to go ahead.
Ivor?
Chair, we have the indicative plan there. Can we condition that the fifth bay is actually a storage bay and is not for additional vehicle usage, as has been demonstrated on the plan? Because additional storage space creates more traffic going in, and that junction at Huntingdon Road, I would say, exceeds its limits just now without actually having more traffic going in there. And I'm happy if it's going to be a store, but if it's going to be additional noise, additional traffic, I have concerns with that for the residents of the area.
David?
The overall use of the site as a garage was granted by the council in 1999, and therefore you can't retrospectively attach conditions about the overall use. The internal arrangements of a building are out with planning control. So how they actually internally organise the business is something that we couldn't really competently condition. I similarly would advise against attaching conditions about doors being open or shut during operations. You've got the layout there. We would be assessing it really on trust that that reception area would go in at the far end, and therefore that door would be open during working hours but wouldn't actually have activity going on. But the enforceability of attaching a condition, I think, would mean it's contrary to Circular 4 1998 on the use of conditions.
Councillor Driver?
Thanks, Chair. I'm of a mind to agree with Councillor Maitland on this, I agree, but just for clarification on the process, you don't actually need to own the land to put an application in, do you? It can come in anyway.
That's correct. The only issue which we had concerns about was whether or not the application form had been completed correctly, because if all the parties who did own the land had not been correctly notified, that would cause concern. We did go back to the agent and check that they have ascertained that the form is filled in correctly, the applicant does own all the land, and therefore you're right, you don't need to own all the land, and we've checked with the agent that the form is correctly completed.
Alistair?
Thanks very much indeed, Chair. The agent, Ms Elliott, said that the application was designed, in fact, to improve the efficiency and the effectiveness of the applicant's business, and I have no problems whatsoever with that concept, Chair. Equally, I don't think, in doing so, that we should totally neglect the interests of the people who are having to live in the vicinity. Now, I do take Mr Sutty's point about it wouldn't be appropriate to condition what was raised and what was suggested, but certain circumstances, when we don't go the length of a condition, we make directives. What would the take be on some form of directive in quotation marks, along the lines of which has already been indicated, which is to say, while not interfering with the applicant's, running of the premises in a more enhanced and effective fashion, and I would commend that, it would not totally ignore the interests of the people living round about. I'd be grateful for clarification, with your leave, sir, on that point.
David?
Yes, that's certainly an option. A directive setting out what the expectations of the council is perfectly competent to attach. The only downside of that is it unfortunately is not enforceable. It's merely an aspiration. It's a list of what the council would like to see going on and setting out a marker, if you like, but we wouldn't be able to pursue it if it was breached.
Alistair?
Thanks very much indeed, sir. Do appreciate it wouldn't be enforceable, but I still think it would be a worthwhile stance for the council to adopt. I think it makes it clear to the applicant, and I'm sure that they would act in good faith and endeavour insofar as they could to comply with what we were suggesting. And on that basis, Chair, I would move, in fact, that we look at the appropriate directive being put on.
Thanks, Chair. I would go on with Alistair. I was going to come in basically the same point. I think that's it's one way to achieve what both the applicant wants in terms of organising his business and what the objector wants in terms of minimising the things we've got some control over. I mean, it does say that as a service delivery base. There's no reason why the applicant cannot keep the door shut when there's no deliveries being made or deliveries being taken away.
Jim?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I would kind of worry about that. I mean, we have the welfare of the staff to consider. In the winter, it might be appropriate to shut the doors. In the summer, in a building like that, you're going to insist doors are closed and maybe impinging the welfare and well-being of staff. I think that's wrong. And I think any responsible operation, to set out a diagram like that, that's how they propose to conduct their business, and I would support that and simply say we should agree the recommendations as set out in the report.
Gillian?
Can I just double check? Councillor Driver, were you supporting Councillor Maitland's motion earlier when Mr Sutty answered?
I'm happy to do that if that's what's needed, yeah.
Ivor?
Chair, I would like to support Councillor Geddes' move with regard to the directive. And I think it would give the owner the opportunity to build some bridges with some of the residents as well if he actually considered adopting the directives, because it seems to be a little bit of, can't you? I don't know, it's a wee bit of friction there, and this might help.
David?
Could I maybe just check with Councillor Geddes the sort of intent of the wording of the direction that you're proposing? I'm assuming it would be along the lines of that the internal layout shown on the plan you have in front of you should be adhered to, and where practical and within terms of health and safety, the doors should remain closed during operations, something along those lines.
Precisely so, Chairman.
Gillian?
Thank you, Chair. We have a motion by Councillor Maitland, seconded by Councillor Drybrough, to approve the application as detailed in the report. And we have an amendment by Councillor Geddes, seconded by Councillor McCautry, to approve the application subject to suggestion in the report, but with an additional directive being put in regarding the internal layout should be adhered to where practical and health and safety allows.
Sorry, Jane?
Chairman, if you would just permit me to make a remark. I haven't spoken since the suggestion was made. I understand about the problems, only too clearly, about the problems of the relationship of an industrial and a residential area. I understand that only too clearly. But in this particular instance, the council cannot enforce this. The business has the ability to do its business. I absolutely resist anything which might make life more difficult for businesses in the area. I just think we should not be doing that. I think we as elected members ought to ask more often what is happening with respect to enforcement of already conditions which have already been made. And I think we also ought to make inquiries actually of the police about parking if there is an obstruction being caused. All these things are not within our remit. And I would really urge members, although I absolutely understand what they're trying to do, don't inadvertently tie businesses' hands. It's really not the right thing to do. Go for all means in other means of making certain that these businesses comply with what they're supposed to be doing, but don't make life more difficult to them through attempt to condition in this way. Thank you, Chairman.
Thanks for that. Yeah.
Chairman, thanks for letting me in at this late point. Can I just ask for clarification, what in real terms is the difference between the motion and the amendment?
Very little. Yeah, I mean, certainly what you have from the motion, as I understand it, is really the recommendation to approve, subject to the condition on page 27 of the agenda being in force. And the amendment is to approve, subject to that condition, plus to add a directive, which, just to be clear with Councillor Maitland, that would be unenforceable. We wouldn't be able to pursue that at all. It's setting out an aspiration and a best practice list, if you like, from the council's perspective. The separate issue about whether or not the conditions are being breached, that will be investigated, that will be looked into. So this application is not making things any more awkward for the applicant to carry out their business, nor would attaching a directive.
Okay, got the vote, Gillian?
Thank you. Councillor Martin?
Motion.
Councillor Dempster?
Motion.
Councillor Blake?
Amendment.
Councillor Crothers?
Amendment.
Councillor Diggle?
Abstain.
Councillor Drybrough?
Motion.
Councillor Ferguson?
Amendment.
Councillor Geddes?
Amendment.
Councillor Groom?
Amendment.
Councillor Hislop?
Amendment.
Councillor Maitland?
Motion.
Councillor McCautry?
Amendment.
Councillor McComb,
Motion.
Councillor McCutcheon,
Amendment.
Councillor Thompson,
Amendment.
Councillor Witts,
Amendment.
Councillor Dick. I don't realise you have just entered the meeting, so it's entirely up to yourself.
I'll abstain.
Five votes to the motion and 10 to the amendment. Therefore, the application has been approved, subject to the condition details in the report, together with a directive being put in place. Thank you.
Thanks, Gillian. We got item 6 on the agenda is application to vary condition for condition 4 of planning permission 11/B/2/0078 to allow a 2-year extension to siting of a residential caravan at Croft Cottages, Dalbeattie, reference number 14/B/2/0439. And we've got Judith going through it in this.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, this is an application to amend a condition. The original application was submitted in 2011, and it was an application for alterations and extension to dwelling house, installation of septic tank and soakaway, and temporary siting of a static caravan for the duration of the works. This was granted subject to conditions in 2011, and condition 4, which is stated in 1.3, paragraph 1.3 of the report, says that the temporary residential caravan hereby granted planning permission shall be removed from the site on or before, which is the first of the following dates, so it would be 3 months from the date of occupation of the dwelling house granted planning permission, or 2 years from the date of the planning permission. A following application in 2013 was submitted for the continued siting of the static caravan, and it was granted in May 2013, and the expiry date so that the date that the caravan had to be removed was the 1st of April 2015, so that the permission still has a small length of time to run. Looking at the application site, it's about half a mile from the B793, which is the Dalbeattie to Cockerbush Road, and it's down at a farm track down to Whitecroft Farm. This is the long leg of the application site is just the septic tank outfall from the previous application. Moving on, this is the block plan from the 2011 application. The caravan is sited in the bottom right-hand side, just there. And this is the proposed layout of the dwelling house, which I think was originally 2 small cottages. This is a view of the caravan from the northwest on approach. This is going down the road from the main road. I've passed the farm and the two cottages, which are going to be made into dwelling house. This is taken looking the other way to the caravan. On the right-hand side, the 2 chimneys you can see are the chimneys from the proposed dwelling house, which is being renovated, and the long dormer window across the other side of the track on the left-hand side is Whitecroft Farm. This is taken looking west. The land's quite high, relatively high around the application site. You can see the caravan and the end of the cottages being renovated. This is panning round towards the northwest. The caravan's just on the left-hand side. It's not actually in the image. Looking up towards the farm building, the farm and the farm buildings, and Auchenskioch Lodge is in the wood. In this wood here. The next two images are just to try and give you an indication of the work that's been done. This was when I first visited the site in November 2014, and since then this is the progress on the cottages. So as you can see, the works are progressing, albeit slowly. Although the application is within the regional scenic area, it's not considered that there would be any significant adverse landscape effect from the extended siting of the caravan for another 2 years, and the application is recommended for approval.
Judith, members? We've got no objectors wishing to speak on this one, so could I have Karen Morley, please, applicant? You've got 3 minutes, Karen. I'll let you know 30 seconds to go.
Thank you. I don't intend to revisit the arguments about whether or not the caravan has a visual or landscape impact. The planning case officer has given a professional judgment on this, and we are satisfied with that. The objectors appear to be under the misapprehension that work has been ongoing on this project and the caravan on site for 4 years. Although full planning permission was granted in May 2011, due to various constraints, we were not able to legally start work until April 2013 and only moved onto the site a few months before that. In just under 2 years, a great deal has been completed. However, much of this is buried underground and not necessarily evident to the casual observer. A list of works can be given to members if they are interested in that detail. The only reason this matter is coming before members is because of the number of objections. It is interesting to note that apart from the herds at Whitecroft Farm, there are no local objections to our application. Discussions with nearby residents reveal that they were shocked that anyone would raise an objection to our caravan, and a number immediately offered to support our application. I have with me 2 letters of support, but these were inevitably received after the consultation was closed. Of the 7 objections, 2 are from the herds, and a further 3 appear to be from Mr. Herd's work colleagues at Scottish Enterprise. We wish to finish our build as quickly as possible, but making us move from the site would not achieve this in any way. We want to achieve a high-quality restoration project which will only enhance the rural landscape of Dumfries and Galloway, and we believe that having the caravan on site for up to 2 more years will be worth the final result. In conclusion, I'm amazed that anyone can believe that I want to live in a caravan for the rest of my life.
Thanks, Karen. Members, Archie.
Thank you, Karen. Can you advise, Karen, your actual finishing, when you think your finishing date of the house will actually be?
As we find out as we go along, things take longer than you think they're going to. I mean, I would hope to get it done within the 2 years and move in sooner. I mean, I want to be in as soon as possible. But, you know, I think the reason why we went for another 2 years was, you know, just in case. You never know what will come up. It's an old building. We find new problems all the time. And, you know, I just want that to make sure we've got the time to do it. It's the quality that we want to do it. I'd rather, and I think it would be better for the building that we take our time and do a quality job than rush something. I'll try to do it in a cheap way and you know, and don't do the best for what is a quite, you know, historic building.
Peter?
If you complete it within the 2 years, will you take the caravan away sooner?
Oh yes, you know, as soon as we can move in, all the better to me, and the caravan will go. It's, you know, it's nothing we want to keep there. It's just purely, you know, a practical thing at the moment.
Member? Right, thanks. Members, we're now in session. Archie?
Agree with the recommendations, Chair.
Ian?
Second.
Alistair?
Thanks, Chair. I'm not otherwise minded, but there is a point here, sir, which I would like some clarification on from Mr. Sutty, with your leave. And it's paragraph 4.4, talking about a start has been made to the development granted permission under the terms of 11P to 0078 And the issue, as far as I'm concerned, sir, is that, and accordingly, the permission has been secured in perpetuity. Now, I'm not suggesting for one moment, Chair, that in this instance, it would be the case, but in certain circumstances, I can well envisage that posing problems for people having to live in the vicinity. And my question really is, how does that statement interrelate, as it were, or relate to the granting of temporary permissions? Because let's take a hypothetical case, not this application, but let's say you have circumstances which are basically similar, and at some point in the future, the council turns around and says, no, we are not, in fact, prepared to grant your application for temporary consent. Where does that leave you in relation to an application which has been started and exists in perpetuity?
Well, it's probably worth making clear that there's two aspects to this. The actual development for the creation of the new house has been secured, and therefore that permission is secured in perpetuity. The only recourse to that is there's a little used part of the planning legislation which is called a completion notice. I've only known to be used in my 25 years in planning. But it does basically say that you have to then complete the works within a certain period of time, and if you don't, the permission therefore lapses. The other part with this was the fact that as part of that overall permission, there was a condition only allowing the temporary retention of that static caravan, and that's what's really before you today. So it's really a variation of that condition and that alone, but the permission for the house, really it would run on unless the council served a notice requiring its completion.
Grateful, Chair, for the information. So there is a more fundamental way of dealing with appropriate issues of this type in the future. But let me repeat, sir, I have no problems with the granting of this application.
Members agreed?
Thank you. Just to confirm that the application has been approved subject to conditions as detailed in the report. Thank you.
That's clear. On to item 7, alterations and change of use from offices to form two flatted dwellings in basement at 4 to 6 Gordon Street, Dumfries, reference number 14/P/3/0326. We've got Claire Eckstein to go through the drawings. Right, Claire.
Thank you, Chair. The application site relates to 4 to 6 Gordon Street. I was previously granted approval for change of use in 2012, but excluded the basement area for residential use. The current proposal in front of us seeks to change this. This is the location plan of the site with Lawburn Primary School noted. This is taken, the changes, key changes relate to the basement area, and this shows a section from Gordon Street. And then the ground floor, which is off Gordon Street, this shows a loss of the proposed office and an incorporation into an existing flat, which already has permission. And then the basement layout shows two flats in the basement. We've got an upper level basement and a lower level basement. And as I go through my presentation, I'll refer to each of the flats as upper and lower level basements. This is the view of the application site from Gordon Street. That's the sort of number 4 end, and then panning round from the previous photograph towards the number 6 end. This is looking at Gordon Street with the windows for the lower basement flat, and then just looking further upwards, panning up from the previous photograph, looking towards George Street. And this is from the other way, looking at the upper basement flat, with looking towards the river and number 8, Gordon Street. The key issue for the application relates to the flood protection measures that are going to be carried out. This shows the proposed garden wall buttress with a 1 in 200 flood level of 11.75. If you can just keep that level in mind when you're looking at the future photographs, because then it'll sort of maybe make more sense. And a lot of this will be done with works behind the existing sandstone walls. This plan shows the position of these walls and the site levels. And again, the next plan shows the site levels, but the photographs which I'm showing next have annotated the various site levels which relate back to these plans. The first photograph here, the black gates mark the alleyway beside the primary school at the Green Sands, obviously at the River Ness, which is a level noted at 9 metres, with the car park of Alzheimer's Scotland, which is at number 8, behind the retaining wall, which is at a higher level. And this is the boundary with the site with Lawburn Primary. So you can see the grey gate, the application site, number 4, which was to the sort of upper basement garden level. And you can see there the top of the wall is marked at 14.260, which is considerably higher than obviously the 11.75, which is your 1 in 200 year flood. So what I've marked here is, this is a view taken from the fire escape. So you've got the level of the garden of the upper basement at 12.370, and then the ground levels are the ones within the playground, and they're obviously the ground slopes as you go downwards towards the river. So the first photograph, which is showed of the black gates, that's the ground level at 9, and then obviously the path, level slopes up towards the camera position. And this is taken from within the garden. So you've got the garden of number 7, which is the adjoining site. You've got the middle one, which would be the lower basement garden. And what they're doing is they're replacing the timber fence. It's going to be replaced with an 11.9 metre height wall at the top. And that will be approximately 1 metre above the basement level flat. You can see there at 10.9, and then obviously the upper basement flat level is 12.370. So the full assessment of the proposal is set out in the report, and notes other planning concerns other than the flooding issue. There were no other issues raised. Paragraph 4.9, the report notes that the flood risk assessment team consider that the property protection measures are acceptable, whereas SEPA in paragraph 4.10, 4.11 maintain their objection, as they consider a more formal flood protection scheme to protect the higher risk residential use would be more appropriate. It's considered that the proposal, when assessed against the flood risk criteria set out in the Scottish planning policy, and the property protection measures proposed, which are the timber, which are the walls and the buttressing, are acceptable, and it's recommended to approve subject to the conditions. But due to the SEPA objection, it will require notification to Scottish ministers.
Thanks, Claire. Members, points of clarification. Jane?
Thank you. That existing timber fence has to be made how much higher then? About another metre?
Sorry, the wall, the ground, lower basement flat ground garden is 10.9. And that will be replaced. There'll be a wall built which will be 1 metre in height, and the top of that wall will be 11.9.
And I'm just curious to know, we don't have to buttress the garden walls?
The garden walls are getting buttressed. The existing sandstone, if I go back to probably this one here, what they're doing is, because the sandstone walls are higher, what they'll do is they'll buttress a wall which is above the 11.75 metre. I think it's shown there as 11.9, and that'll make sure that they're sound, those walls, and the applicant's agent provided a structural certificate confirming that those walls could hold back the floodwater were it to happen.
Any other member? Aye.
It's with regard to the 1 in 200, now it's a fluvial flood. There's a scheme being proposed for the White Sands. What effects will that have on any fluvial floods going forward? And do we need to take that into consideration today because it could have a detrimental impact on this?
Yeah.
I'm afraid I'm not a flood risk expert, so I can't. I'm not here to judge. What the advice is from the flood risk management team is that they're happy with what's proposed at a property protection level, which is what's proposed for this scheme. So I'm not a mind reader for what may happen in the future.
But did that take into account current situation as in the 2011 flood risk map, or if we put something in that may distort that going forward?
David.
Well, obviously the council's flood risk team have made the assessment on the information that we have today in the 1 in 200 year flood predictions, which we have from SEPA. Notwithstanding that, the flood risk team have been clearly involved and are well aware of the White Sands proposals, so we'll have borne that in mind when they've made their comments, I'm fairly certain.
Stephen?
Thank you. Yeah, it was just on a similar subject. 413 on page 45, the first sentence alludes to the long-term flooding issues for Dumfries, which I'm sure we're all aware of, and that the future vulnerability of the site to flooding may reduce further, but I assume it could increase equally as well, given the unknown nature of it. So I'm just wondering, would it be worth just ignoring the first sentence there because it's a complete unknown at the moment?
It's fair to say there's probably a fair amount of hypothetical stuff which is involved with the White Sands scheme. We don't fully know the implications, but these are professional officers who will have assessed that, and they've taken this application under the known 1 in 200 year flood risk and made their assessment on that, but they will also have factored in other potentials as far as they can be aware at the moment.
Alistair?
Thanks, Chair. On a similar vein, I thought we were always instructed when looking at planning applications to look at them in isolation, and by that token, surely we can discount what flood prevention schemes may or may not come to fruition and just look at this as is.
Yes, that's basically what I'm saying. We can only properly go on the 1 in 200 year flood risk because that's all we know. Anything else is speculation at this stage.
Jim?
Thanks, Chair. Do we know if one-way valves have been fitted to the sewers in this part of Dumfries?
In a word, no. Sorry.
Other members? No. Could I have the applicant, please? David Fallis, Hamlet Holdings, the agent. 3 minutes, David, and I'll let you know. 30 seconds to go.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, members, officials of the Council. Thanks for the opportunity to speak on the matter today. The issue is really to overcome the concerns that SEPA have, and we feel that SEPA, in respect to this particular proposal, are grossly unfair to maintain their objection. Their objection is on the basis that the applicants are not instigating a series of measures beyond the scope of the site that's going to rectify a perceived problem in a 1 in 200 year storm. And they're dutifully ignoring key considerations, which obviously have featured heavily in Claire's assessment of this, which we're not proposing any new buildings or any new structures within the established floodplain here. We are re-establishing the residential use of the premises itself. It was built as a house, and we're turning it back to residential purposes. The works that are being undertaken are within the confines of the site behind a quite sound, true and significant boundary wall. That in its own right will have been factored into whatever flood risk management aspects are being considered to it, because we're not interfering with the effective floodplain in any way, because these walls, as you can tell by the total height, are appreciably above the 1 in 200 year storm. The works that we're instigating are a sort of belt and braces approach to, well, we're being criticised for doing works that were there to try to address the concerns of the statutory consultees. Flood risk management team have seen common sense and accepted it for that and appreciate the works that we're doing. SEPA, on the other hand, seem to have taken a more exalted view on this, and as I say, have been, unfair. To answer some of the questions that the members have raised earlier doors following Claire's presentation, the wall that is going to replace the timber fence is going to be only marginally higher than that existing timber fence. We're putting in a wall because it gives more effective barrier should the wall beyond the confines of this site
30 seconds, David.
actually fail. So we're just doing a belt and braces approach in that regard. With regards to the matter of the regurg valves to the sewers, as part of the process, we are going to fit regurg valves to protect the premises itself. So that's a matter that's taken care of. And the barriers that we're enclosing is effectively a third level of defence, because the only point of access into...
Sum up now, David.
Oh, fair point.
Members, any questions for David?
Mr. Fallis, in the report we have, you've sent a letter from Asher Associates. Could you just make or reassure me that the structural design certificate was based on the current flood plan, or is it taken into account if there were flood protection measures so that structurally the wall will be sound enough if something changes?
The levels that we have adopted have been taken from the Council's report on the matter and have been based on option 1 within that report, which is the preferred option we presently believe. We had discussions prior to the application and coming in from the flood risk management team to try to establish what level it is that they're looking at. We have pitched our level at the top end of what may ever be considered as being prudent, as actually happening here, together with an element of freeboarding, which is that sort of wriggle room element of it. So I've taken on board what the flood risk management team have done, and on the basis of that level, Ashers have looked at the wall, and they are quite happy that the wall itself is sound. However, as a belt and braces approach, the buttressing element is being incorporated, and the new wall between the properties will also help support that wall across the entire length of our particular property. So we're just trying to make sure that that is done to the best of our abilities and a reasonable element for this 1 in 200 year event. So again, as we're not putting any new structures or any new building works or anything like that within the functional floodplain, that should not in its own right be affected. It shouldn't be higher or lower, but the fact is we've factored in at the upper element of it just to be on the safe side.
Okay. Ian?
Thanks, Chairman. You see, David, when you're looking at that picture there, whereabouts in the 1 in 200 year flood plan, whereabouts does the water level come up to? Does it even come up to there? Does it come up as far as there? Where does it, say that fence line was your wall was built and constructed, where would it come up to in that? Does it come up as high as that?
The 1 in 200 year event will happen outside the wall on the right-hand side that separates the site from the primary school, in this area in here. Now, you've got ground level on the outside at 11,367. The projected level we've got is 11,750 at, across the back. Now, remembering that is sloping down quite evenly and consistently down to 9 metres onto the green sand. So at that particular point, it's going to be And old money, what, about 15 inches? 450, and in fact, not even that, just over a foot at that point. And when you go further on down the alleyway, it's, you know, a foot and a half, a foot 8 inches. So, you know, it's not even over your wellies. And I'm not trying to dismiss it as being inconsequential by saying that, but that's a degree of flooding that is projected that may happen there. And given that the 1175 is not the forecasted level for the water, that's with 250 mil on top for the freeboard that we've allowed. So there may be water there, but it won't be a great deal. And this is what Ashers have applied, have signed the certificate for, because the projected amount of water along there, from a loading point of view, isn't going to be that high or significant to knock over a 500 mil stone wall.
Councillor Witts.
Thanks, Chairman. I would seek guidance from Mr. Fallis regarding the comment from SEPA, the final part, the paragraph 2.1 in the final sentence, which I don't understand. SEPA would therefore recommend that the avoidance principle is adopted or a lower vulnerability use proposed. To my plain, simple layman's mind, avoidance principle means either you didn't do it at all, or perhaps it means you do something to prevent what flooding happening. Could you clarify that, please? It's appropriate to ask you to do that.
Yeah, see, we addressed those concerns to SEPA during the processing of the planning application, because they're quoting an element within the Scottish Planning Policy Guideline, SPP1, in respect of these particular matters. Now, in saying that the precautionary principle to avoid was the guidance that was given in previous iterations of the SPP. In the current one, it acknowledges that within urban settlements such as this, it is possible to have these higher risk uses of the site. But, you know, as is clarified within the report, and as we ourselves have submitted, the element, SEPA are putting a disproportionate amount of regard here for the risk element, considering all the measures that are being put into place here. Within the reports, further on within the report, it goes through the process that within the SPP, it advises that you do if you consider that there may be a risk in respect of that. And, you know, Claire has carefully gone through all of the 13 points there, and most of which don't actually apply to the particular case in question here, and the ones that do has given, you know, a valid assessment of where the situation is, and that's allowed them to arrive at the fact at the end of the day, the property, the use, the intention to return it back to its original use is not in actual fact at significant risk, and maybe SEPA are being a wee bit too protectionist of their situation there and not willing to consider the fullness of it, their interpretation of the matter.
Members? Thanks, David. Members are now in session. Councillor McCall.
Move the recommendation is in the papers.
Councillor Driver. Agreed? Clear.
Thank you, Chair. Just to confirm that the application has been approved as detailed in the report, that is to notify Scottish ministers of the intention to approve subject to condition. Thank you.
Thanks, Gillian. Move on to item 8, the consultation regarding an application made under section 36 of the Electricity Act 1989 for the construction of wind farm comprising 24 turbines, 72 MW and associated infrastructure at Stranoch, New Luce. And we've got Robert Duncan speaking on this.
Thank you, Chair. I'll just give members a quick update before I present the slides. You'll notice in the report, particularly at 1.1, 1.2, 1.3, 1.4, and 1.5, the background to the case. And members may recall this went to Planning Applications Committee on the 26th of March last year. The Council were minded to object to this proposal. It's a Section 36 application under the Electricity Act, which means that the Scottish ministers determine it and the Council are a consultee.
On the strength of the previous objection, that's triggered a PLI, which is already in train, if you like, at the moment. As part of that PLI process, additional information has been submitted, and there's really 4 aspects to that. Firstly, in relation to access. Secondly, an update on cumulative wind energy development in the area, and that's more an update for the PLI itself. Additional ecological information as was requested by SNH, and further information relating to unexploded ordnance within the area. In relation to the council's original reasons for objection, which you can see on, I think it's on page 52, halfway up, you've got point 3. There was a concern there that insufficient information had been submitted within the previous consultation. So from the council's perspective, this is an attempt to provide that information. So I'll just run through the slides. Looking at the overall application site itself, 2 clusters of turbines in the grey area on the right-hand side, one towards the north of that area and the other one to the south. The access, which is very much the focus of this addendum, if you like, to the consultation, you can see in between the A77 stretching up and linking to the application site, so going broadly in a northeasterly direction from the A77. The next picture is showing similar idea, but in much closer detail, and it shows, you can see the dotted line moving down from the area of activity in the northeast, top right-hand side of the slide, and the proposed access route coming down to link into the A77. Looking at it in greater detail, these are the parts closest to the A77 and Loch Ryan on the left-hand side, and you've got the rectangles A, B and C. In respect of A, this is a proposal at the junction with the A77, which is the grey line on the left-hand side, and you can see that there are now details of the proposed bellmouth, including crucially landscaping and also cross-sectional profiles, which you can see in the top left and bottom right-hand side of this slide, which gives you an idea of the kind of access road that would be constructed. Moving further on, this is within rectangle B. Again, you've got an idea of the profiles that are involved, and that includes at the bottom some benching, some kind of cut and fill works, if you like, relative to certain parts of that stretch of the route. Finally, again, and this is demonstrating how landscaping has been shown, you've got the proposed access route. This is within rectangle C, comparing it with the map 3 slides back, and you can see there's now landscaping proposed. And finally, this is a detail of the bridging point over the water of Luce, which is proposed and necessary to access the site. Important points to note are in relation to this extra information, and taking this back to point 3 of the previous objection, we've undertaken consultation with the Council's Roads Officer, and that appears at 2.1 on page 54, and crucially, the Council Landscape Architect at 2.2, and those are covering pages 54 to 55. She had expressed concerns previously about the prospect of significant visual impact from this, and you can see her comments there. Moving to the body of the report itself on page 57, it's been kept fairly brief and really trying to just focus on key issues, and taking all issues together and in cognizance of where we are with the PLI process, it's recommended that members are now able, if you're minded, to provide a statement to Scottish Ministers amending the previous stated reasons for objection. Those were the ones at the meeting of the 26th of March last year, to remove the reference to the 3rd stated reason for objection, but otherwise leave the Council's response unchanged. I would point out, in relation to the PLI, a team of officers have been assembled to represent the Council for that, and it's due to begin on the 20th of April this year, but the exchange of paperwork, statements and so on has already started, so it's very much a work in progress.
Members, questions for Robert? Ian?
Thanks, Chair. I'm sorry if I'm stating the obvious, but what you're basically saying is maintain the objection but remove item 3.
Yeah. Jim?
Thank you, Chair. The road runs across Braefield. Do we have an assurance that all the ordnance from the Braefield bombing range has been removed?
I don't know. I can't answer the question. The idea with the ordnance datum, it was something that was raised as an issue by the Community Council at the pre-PLI meeting at the Memorial Hall in New Luce, and they were concerned about it, and they wanted a survey to be done so that the reporter could take it into account during the course of the PLI. It's very much something that needs to be put to the reporter, and it's for them to weigh up. Offhand, I simply don't know, quite honestly, but that information is being collated so that the reporter can be advised and take a view on that issue.
Thank you.
Other questions, member? We're in session. Agree with recommendations?
Just to confirm that the committee have agreed to amend the ground for objection by removing reference to the objection number 3. Thank you.
Going to item 9, erection of school building comprising a nursery, primary and secondary school facilities and formation of associated car parking, landscaping and infrastructure at site of existing Dalbeattie High School, Haugh Road, Dalbeattie, reference number 14/B/2/0259. We've got Pat. We've got Dean speaking on this one. So when you're ready, Dean.
Thank you. Proposal is indicated, or the site of the proposal is indicated on page 59 of your papers. It shows its relationship to the western side of Dalbeattie, just on the edge of the settlement. It relates to the existing secondary school, and the site is actually subject to an allocation for a new school campus in the current LDP. The principal elements of the proposal are set out and provided at paragraph 1.4 on page 62. It's very extensive. There's a lot to it, a lot of detail. I won't want to run through that in detail now, but it's all set out on those pages of the report. If I just take you through the slides. Again, that's the application site. You can see the relationship of the site to the existing school. The proposal will involve extending the school grounds west. So presently, the western limit of the school is the line running, if you like, northwest to southeast through the L, between the L and the I in the word application. So it'd extend into the fields to the west of that current boundary. Yep. That's the site plan as proposed. As I say, there's a lot of detail in there. What it shows it's the area generally enclosed by the green. You've got the proposed school set out on to the right, emphasised to the right. A new parking area to the front of that school. You've got Craignair Road, the A711 running and forming the boundary at the south of the site, and then to the west or the left on that image, you've got the new athletic sports facilities. It's a 6-lane track with sports facilities enclosed within it, and more sports facilities just to the immediate north of the school, and lots of landscape grounds and other bits and pieces such as garden facilities, all sorts of gardens and landscaped areas. This is just focusing on various elements within the proposal. These are the sports facilities. As I've already said, you've got the 6-lane athletics track with field sports contained within it, and also doubles as a rugby pitch. You've got 3G pitch to the immediate north of this proposed school building, which is for football. You've contained between the football pitch, the 3G pitch, and the school, you've got a netball stroke basketball pitch, and in green to the right, the smaller pitch, that's, what is that? That's a tennis stroke five-a-side pitch. This is a landscaping scheme, very extensive, includes areas of woodland planting, biodiversity pond, orchards, nursery gardens, sensory gardens, outdoor play facilities for the children, landscaping around the car park, and mown grass and grassed areas to the west. And that includes a trim track, like a cross-country running track around the athletics track and across the north of the site. Now I've got the elevations of the school building. It's made up of distinct elements that will contain the separate schools and nursery, and they can join in the centre for some shared facilities. Again, that's further images. Materials are grey block work with darker grey cement fibre that will come off the roof and slide and overlap upper stories. Extensive areas of glazing and coloured panels that would indicate entrances into the school. And here's some various perspectives that are provided within the submission. So that's the main entrance into the school from the associated with the car parking area. That's the perspective of the secondary school, primary school, and the nursery. It also includes quite an extensive package of off-site roadworks and works to improve the pedestrian cycle environment. Includes the extension of the 30-mile-an-hour speed limit from its current position on Stranraer Road to the west. It would go beyond the proposed new school access to a point that's yet to be detailed of what the access and the whole school frontage will be contained within the 30-mile-an-hour limit. New part-time 20-mile-an-hour speed restrictions around the junction of the A710, A711. Shared footways and cycleways, footway widening, alterations to the existing vehicle access from the Haugh Road, and this would be for the prioritisation of pedestrians and cycle users, and to prevent and discourage drop-off at that area. And also signalisation of the junction there between the A711 and the A710. There'll be more detail as we go through. That's a detail of the signalisation and works to the junction of the A710. Each road feeding into that junction will become signalised with improved crossing across the junction to make for the convenience or the best convenience of pedestrians. That's a detail of the proposed alterations to the existing Haugh Road access. It would include narrowing of the access, improvement of signage and surfacing to encourage entry by pedestrians and cyclists. Now if we just take some images around the site. Now that's looking north along Haugh Road from the existing access. And if we pan left from that, we're looking directly into the school grounds as you presently access the site. And then that's panning left again, looking south along the Haugh Road, looking down towards the junction between the A710 and A711. And then that's us arriving from the north to that junction as it presently stands. And now that's on the A711 looking west towards the school site, looking out along Stranraer Road, and then moving forward from that junction. On the left here, what you'd have is not improved, the actual implementation of a shared cycleway. The main pedestrian access into the site would wrap across the front of that dwelling you see on the right, and then bend into the school grounds, just where the trees are. Now this is going to the other end of the proposed site. This is the access into the farm. This is where the western limit of the extended school grounds would terminate. And then panning right from that, looking back along the long straight of Craignair Road, the 30-mile-an-hour limit would be extended towards where the photograph's taken here, and the hedgerow there on the left would be enclosing. Well, there'd be new planting there to enclose the extended grounds. Moving forward, just going back into Dalbeattie towards the junction. We've hopped over the hedgerow there. This is the hedgerow forming the southern boundaries it presently stands. That's one of the nearest dwellings to the school. Panning left, got the existing school with obviously previous extensions accommodated in porter cabins. That's to the opposite side of the site. That's the later addition of the sports hall. And that's panning right from that previous image, looking again across the rear of the school as it backs onto the outdoor playing facilities. And that's panning right, just taking in the whole grounds as they presently stand. And that's the northern boundary as it presently stands. And that will be extended off camera to the right. These are the enclosing fields present. This is where essentially this will be retained as a wet area, as a natural area, and the new track will be in where you can just see the green field there beyond this wet area. And again, we're just panning right across the proposed athletics track. This is moving to the north. This will be enclosed within the extended school grounds. This area backs onto properties through the trees on Broomlands. And then this is going down the northern side of the existing games hall. Moving forward, we've got the tennis court. This is all between the existing school and Haugh Road in the narrow area that's presently enclosed by those. Panning right, you've got the tennis court. And moving forward, back towards the main entrance, across the yard. And then that's looking back across the front of the school as it presents itself to Haugh Road. The allocation is allocated in the LDP, and that allocation establishes the suitability of the site for a replacement school campus to serve the whole of the town. The development offers significant beneficial opportunities to improve educational facilities in Dalbeattie and for the wider catchment, and also out of hours community facilities, as some of those will be available out of hours. Also supports development of the local economy and promotes the wider regeneration of Dalbeattie. Hence, it's been recommended for approval subject to the conditions as set out, paragraph 5.1.
Thanks, Dean. Any points of clarification for Dean? Jane?
Almost the only thing that sort of filled me with slight gloom when I read this was on page 62, with the words separated with flat roofed elements. How flat roofed are these elements? I mean, I just wonder about the council finding itself with flat roofs when we've done everything we can up till now to get away from them.
The flat roofed elements are hidden behind the ridge roofs. It's where the buildings connect. So where you see, say, for example, in the top image and then the third image down, the roofs hip into the centre. The flat roofed elements are out of view. It's where those buildings join in over the central area on those two images. So that when you're a pedestrian down at ground level, you wouldn't see the flat roofs, you'd only see ridged elements.
Ian?
Thank you. I think 2 points really, clarification. The signalisation of the junction of Haugh Road and the 711, will that be a full-time signalisation, 24 hours a day? And my second point is that Haugh Road just now is part of the timber transport route for northbound traffic heading towards A75, where southbound, if that's my directions are correct, go down Maxwell Street. One of the main reasons that the timber transport lorries couldn't make the turn into Craignair Street was the lack of a signalisation of that junction. And my concern is now, if we do signalise it, that we'll get a double flow of timber transport passing the school.
Dean?
The signalisation will be permanent. All I can say about timber transport is that in getting to this position for the off-site works, because as the proposal originally came in, it didn't include this full package of off-site works that are now included, and the original submission did not include the signalisation, and the roads officer had to negotiate through a series of meetings with education and with the construction company, and I'm fully aware that timber transport was part of those discussions, although it's not come out specifically in the consultation to me, but I'm fully aware that the roads officer was aware of the timber transport route in suggesting this package of off-site measures, and was satisfied that there was no conflict.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I'm satisfied with that. I think it's probably something that we could take up at a later stage with the Timber Transport Authority, should they want to change their route past the school. Thanks.
Sure, that will be taken. Another member? Members, are now in session. Dave?
I think I missed the vote there. It was just a quick question on for the officer there. Again, it was back to some of the Police Scotland feedback in terms of road safety. So there's a number of things I see, Part C and Part G, on the 40 mile an hour speed restriction, etc., and the 20 mile an hour speed limit being sort of included in section 2.1 above, as it were. The 20 mile an hour, I presume it's not a sort of 20's plenty sort of zone, it's actually just a temporary 20 mile an hour limit, but it's only temporary.
Yeah, there are temporary signals at the moment. I think the roads office talked about just resiting those and repositioning them. So there are those controls presently. It's just to do with obviously the start and end of the day for school.
Thanks, Chair. The only other question that I had was actually to do with timber again. But given that there's a biomass element to the school, I presume that will have a regular flow of wood pellets coming into the school. So would it be possible to show us just what the access route for that kind of delivery would be?
I think the biomass building's at the western end of the school, so deliveries would come via the proposed new access off Craignair Road. But the existing access, the Haugh Road, it's designed such that there is still the ability for larger vehicles to come into the site, but its prioritisation is for pedestrians and cyclists, and it will be designed such a way it would not encourage access, but should service vehicles need to get into school from that side, they can still do so. It's shown on that detail. So that's vehicle tracking there to show that a larger vehicle can still get into the site.
Is this a question for dinner or in session, Andy? Well, as I say, Stephen come in with a question for Dean. So, well.
Dean, my reading of this is that 7-Eleven is going to end up the main, also pedestrian access. You know, where does the 20's plenty finish in terms of the 7-Eleven? Where about in this is, because if we're getting primary school kids and nursery children and mums and pushchairs and everything else, are there any plans to extend? I know there's a plan to extend the 30 thing along Craignair Road, but what about the safe routes to school situation?
The consultation from the roads officer, whilst he's expressed satisfaction with the general detail, he's asked that a condition is attached, and it's one of the conditions, I'm not sure which one it is, but I'll be able to let you know in a moment. conditions 6 and 7, 5 and 6 relate to, and 4 as well, sorry, relate to off-site works. What the roads office asked for is that precise details are still required to be submitted and agreed because it will need fine-tuning, and he said that in his response.
Members now in session. Ivor.
Chair, just to move the recommendations to agree it with a little bit of sadness as yourself. You were a cricketer as well. There's no cricket pitch provision there now, but
No, very good one, no, Ivor. Members. Ian.
I was just a second that.
Dylan.
Thank you, Chair. Just to confirm, the application has been approved, subject to the conditions as detailed in the report. Thank you very much.
Erection of dwelling house and installation of septic tank and soakaway plot 1. B. Erection of dwelling house and installation of septic tank and soakaway plot 2. C. Erection of a dwelling house and installation of septic tank and soakaway plot 3 at Braefield Poultry Unit, Leswalt Road, Stranraer. So the application numbers are 14/P/1/0654, 14/P/10655, 14/P/10/0656. I've got Pat going through with this. If you Pat, just whenever ready.
Thank you, Chair. This application is before members solely as a result of the applicant being directly related to a council officer who is directly involved in the planning system. The application is for planning permission in principle for 3 plots just outside the settlement of Stranraer, to the west of Stranraer. This shows the proposed site plan for plot 1, and you can see a number, or you can see the footprint of some existing poultry units that exist on the site. Plot 2 in red, and plot 3. The application site is just out with the settlement boundary for Stranraer, as identified in the local development plan, which was adopted by the council in September of last year. I'm running through some of the photographs. This is looking at the site and the existing poultry units on the site, and looking west with Stranraer, from the west to Stranraer in the distance. This is a reverse view. This is the access to the site, and plot 2, the access itself. This is plot 3, which would incorporate just a small area of the existing buildings to the left-hand side of the screen, but the large part of the site is in open countryside. And running through some typical photographs of the existing buildings on the site. This is looking from the rear of the site over to Loch Ryan. The existing and proposed access to the 3 plots. Visibility. Sorry about that. And this is the open aspect from the frontage of the site over open countryside. And this shows the poultry units on the left-hand side of the screen with the separation distance between those poultry units and Stranraer on the horizon. The proposals require to be assessed under the Council's Housing in the Countryside policy, H3, and this policy differs from the Council's previous policy, D4, in that it now supports beneficial redevelopment of brownfield sites. The Council's approved consultation draft supplementary guidance expands upon this broad support that's offered by the new policy, stating that not every rural brownfield site is appropriate for redevelopment, and there is no blanket or unrestrained support for such proposals. Only sites which are demonstrably intrusive, visually or environmentally, and where there's no realistic prospect of them being returned to agricultural land or forestry land or other uses, will be considered suitable sites for development. These buildings are very typical of agricultural buildings across the entire rural landscape of Dumfries and Galloway, and as can be seen from the photographs, they're not demonstrably intrusive. Furthermore, as you can also see from the photographs, that the sites are in existing uses for the purposes of agriculture, and it's not been clearly demonstrated why an agricultural use could not continue at this site. In conclusion, for the reasons set out in the report, the recommendation is one of refusal. Thank you.
Right, members, points of clarification? Ian?
Just in regard to, see, it looks like it's the kind of chicken ranch, you could see on the left-hand side, you've got your huts. The buildings that are in the horizon, as it's been pointed out, is that, I take it that's the boundary of Stranraer, is it? So that is the settlement boundary of Stranraer we're looking at there?
That's correct, yes.
Peter?
Thank you. What's the current agricultural use?
The application is described as former poultry units, but I mean, certainly you can see that there are sheep wandering around across the site at the time the photographs were taken.
Yeah.
Can I just let you know that those buildings probably aren't appropriate for sheep?
Alistair?
Thanks, Chair. The case officer, if I heard him correctly, made reference in one of his slides to, the buildings of Stranraer on the horizon. Could he tell us, please, how far away, or, in horizontal terms, the site is from the nearest settlement boundary in Stranraer?
Thank you, Chair. The site is approximately 150 metres from the existing built form of Stranraer. In terms of the settlement boundary, you can see that there is an allocated housing site on the opposite side of the road on the approach to Stranraer from the sites. It's identified as the purple square to the far west of the settlement boundary.
Grateful, sir. So we're talking about the northern side of the road there, 150 metres, as it were, from there to the boundary of the existing. It's only London that has a west end, Chair. Stranraer's got a west end as well, to the west end. But we're talking also, sir, about the purple bit, the Ribena coloured bit, for want of a better term, and the south side of the road. That boundary will basically be, it will be level with the west, with the easternmost boundary of the application site. Is that the case, Chair?
Yes, there will be the road intervening, but the sites are effectively corner to corner.
Thank you, Chair.
Members? Councillor McClung has asked to speak at this meeting. You've got 3 minutes, Jim. I'll let you know 30 seconds to go, and you'll be required to leave after you make the presentation.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Thanks for being allowed this opportunity to speak. Just one slight correction to what the officer said. I would have been calling this application in if it hadn't been already been called in because of the stated. Initially, I'd like to address the reasoning behind treating these applications as under policy H3. While technically correct, I question the rigidity in which these interpretation of the policies has been applied in this case. The report itself mentions a site within the LDP
That's STR H8, the one Councillor Geddes was referring to. It's quite literally across the road from these application sites. In fact, if a developer were to submit an application to build on the westernmost half of that LDB site, these houses would be further from the current town boundary, so to speak, than those being applied for in the application site. Given that these applications are being considered under Policy H3, I will watch with interest what policy any application to develop the westernmost end of that LDB site is decided under. To turn to the remaining contents of the report itself, at various points the report suggests that the land could be returned to agricultural use, and the buildings present on site are purpose-built and designed to raise poultry, and the buildings are not demonstrably intrusive or visually environmentally that distract from the amenity of the surrounding area. These buildings are quite obviously chicken sheds in layman's terms, and were designed and built numerous years ago, and even with repair or renovation would, in my view, probably struggle to comply with modern legislation. The very small area of land, even with the buildings removed, would, in my view, as someone who was born and brought up on a farm, would quite obviously not be large enough to sustain any economically viable agricultural use. As per what are, in my view, as locally the dilapidated state of the buildings, which cannot now serve the purpose for which they were built and have been empty and decaying for several years, not being visibly intrusive, I think that's quite obviously a matter of opinion. I drive that road regularly. As a local who regularly loses that road past these buildings, they are, in my opinion, most definitely a blot in the landscape, as the saying goes. To turn to the recommendations in the report, given that all that I have said, it is my contention that even under Policy H3, the site as it exists is intrusive and detracts from the surrounding area, and given the very small acreage of the land in question, it will never be economically viable for a standalone agricultural use. Therefore, I would ask that members either grant these applications or at the very least undertake a site visit before coming to your decision. Again, Chair, I must thank you and the members for this opportunity to speak.
Thanks, Jim. Members, now in session. Ian?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I fully appreciate, obviously, many members won't be just as familiar, but I feel that the slides probably give a clear indication of the site itself. Referring to 4.7 there, the applicant's supporting statement argues that existing buildings are discordant and intrusive within the setting of the settlement and visually and environmentally incompatible with adjoining residential land uses. And I would entirely agree with that. I would also entirely agree with the three statements made by the representation of support. In consequence, turning to the recommendations, I would actually move that we grant this application on the basis that the existing site is demonstrably intrusive visually and environmentally, and the condition of the site significantly detracts from the amenity of the surrounding area. And I would also say that it has been demonstrated that the existing site cannot remain in use as an agricultural land, since it comprises derelict chicken buildings, and in general that it would be beneficial to the Stranraer and the surrounding area.
Jane?
Thank you. I think there are sort of arguments on both sides on this one. It is actually the case that we ought to be using H3. There is no doubt about that. Our policy is clear. Question of whether we interpret it and whether there are other reasons, material reasons for going against it. I don't disagree with members that the chicken sheds are demonstrably unattractive, but I think our policy suggests that this particular brownfield site, is it impossible to be used for agriculture? Well, no, it's not impossible to be used for agriculture. Quite obviously it can be. It houses silage bales and it's got sheep on it already. The other arguments being used is STRH8, which frankly has got nothing to do with this application at all. Not a thing. So if members are minded to agree this on the pure basis that they think these sheds are ugly, that's only one factor as against the other factors, which are, I think, pretty clear. that we shouldn't be going for this application. I'll be glad to hear what other members have to say.
Could I just ask, David, was this put forward to go into the new local development plan?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, this application site was put forward through the call for sites and was considered by officers and indeed the full council, and was rejected for inclusion within the LDP. It went forward to the actual inquiry, and the reporter equally considered the inclusion of this site and didn't include it. So obviously the LDP was only adopted by the council in September, so there's only 5 months for it to come in. I think it is fair to say that in the fullness of time, if the sites which have been identified, and basically anything you see on that screen there as purple, if that hasn't come forward, or even if some of the mixed use area which is in red at the harbour, if that doesn't come forward, then we could, at the end of this plan period, consider whether or not these sites are effective. But as it stands, it's only had 5 months to run through, and therefore I would have to argue what has changed. Has anything changed since the LDP was adopted? Have these sites been tested for whether or not they're effective? And my answer is obviously not as yet. Therefore, I strongly feel this would be very premature to jump in and approve these ones on this basis. Furthermore, 3 houses here, if we were looking at a strategic release of the land, for this whole land to be included, would include things such as a proper road layout, sud schemes, open space, and so on. It could damage the proper strategic release of this land in due course to just have 3 houses done on an ad hoc basis. For all those reasons, I think the recommendation is correct.
Thanks, David. Ian?
Yeah, it's just really a matter of clarity. Possibly David can help. I appreciate we're dealing with this particular application, and what Councillor Maitland said about the STRH8 is another matter. But given that that is land that's been identified for housing, and in the circumstances that this chicken farm can be reinstated, that would ultimately lead to a great degree of land use conflict with housing being directly across from this location. So how do we consider that in any way at all?
Well, obviously the STRA H8 site was considered as part of the local development plan process and was included. The fact that you have the existing land use there, you will have all sorts of potential conflict throughout a rural area such as this, where you are identifying new housing areas next to existing agricultural uses. That would have been considered at that time, but it didn't stop that piece of land being identified. Beyond that, I really can't comment, I'm afraid.
Yeah. Thank you for that. I'm just bearing in mind a site visit we'll have next week.
Thanks, Chair. I've known that site for well nigh 40 years. In fact, just a couple of weekends ago, I had another look at it. The blunt fact of the matter, sir, is, you know, these buildings are bordering dereliction. I think they're intrusive. And insofar as returning the site to agriculture is concerned, I think we should be careful what we might wish for. Because if you take the area of land between the site and the boundary of Stranraer, that belongs to, shall we, I'll call them landowner A, and the land, the other side of it, belongs to landowner B, one of the biggest landowners in that part of Wigtonshire, let me say for the record. And it seems to me that, you know, if we're hell-bent on pushing this site to be returned to agriculture, you might very well find that you'll finish up with some form of poultry-type development, or maybe even, some of us would argue in terms of visual intrusiveness, etc., maybe a massive cattle shed. To me, it's highly significant that there's been no objections lodged in relation to this proposal as it stands. Without being speculative, Chair, I wouldn't like to think what might be the case with the 2 forms of agricultural use that I've alluded to, but be that as it may, as far as I'm concerned, sir, to tidy this area up, to put housing on it of the type, in fact, which is being proposed, would clear the site up and return it to a better and a much more beneficial use, Chair. There's no doubt, in my opinion, that the locality would be significantly improved by doing that. And in my opinion, the proposed development would constitute a beneficial redevelopment of this brownfield site and would therefore be consistent, in my view, with the terms and requirements of Policy H3. I also would put it to you, sir, that there is a unique set of circumstances in respect of the very limited area of land which comprises this holding in the site. And as I've already indicated, I think it's unrealistic, as it were, to be suggesting, in fact, that it will be returned to agriculture. So on that basis, I would certainly be supportive, as it were, of the application which is before us today being granted.
Jim?
Thanks, Chair. There has been a suggestion that this land could return to agriculture. Well, you'd require to remove the buildings, the foundations of the buildings, and there is a possible contaminated land issue as well. Now, assuming a farmer is prepared to go through all that rigmarole, you would want to intensify the use of the land. That would require, if it's grassland, regular slurry spraying. If you want to use it for arable, regular crop spraying, I would contend that slurry spreading, crop spraying are contentious issues which would simply create a conflict with the neighbouring householders. Quite honestly, to me, this is a classic case of a brownfield site where redevelopment would be beneficial. The buildings are an eyesore, nothing less. I think actually housing there would be much more compatible with the neighbouring area, built-up area of Stranraer.
I think Mr. Sutty had actually said that in fullness of time it could probably be used for housing, but as a new local development plan has only been in for 5 months, and this was refused. It wasn't included at the time. I think that was it's a bit premature with this application. Jim.
Thanks, Chair. It does strike me as strange that the land on the other side of the road should have been allocated for housing, whereas this side of the road has not been allocated for that purpose.
Jim?
We're just about talking about sporadic development in the countryside here. This council, everybody here agreed to this local development plan a few weeks ago. The folk that are talking about it now did. And the reporter already declined it a few weeks ago. Why we're even considering reversing an officer's recommendation, I have no idea, and I'm certainly happy to propose that we accept the officer's recommendation.
I'll second you, Jim. Ivor?
Chair, the idea that we could have a cattle shed in that site, well, you could actually have a cattle shed between the site and the boundary of the town because there's a green field in between. And I think to actually develop this site as is premature. I think we should look to actually, my view would have been better if you had had the two big fields coming out. Is it owner 2, Alistair stated, slightly further west. That would have been the boundary for me if I had been looking at a site that's not in here. To put 3 houses in the middle of nowhere, as it is, with a gap, you could have farming between, you could have current housing, farm, new proposed housing. And I don't think that is good planning, and I would support your and Councillor Dempster's view.
Ian Crairs and Councillor McCarthy. Then we'll go to the vote.
Thanks, Chairman. Suppose going back to some of the comments that we made, I'll go back to when we did actually agree, at full council, we agreed the local development plan. I made it very clear at that point I felt there was a political deficit within the actual local development plan, and that was agreed by all parties. Everybody made that same statement. I think this is an outcome of that political deficit that was there. In regards to that, I also asked a question of the head of planning and building standards at the time, being Steve, and he confirmed the question that I asked, and that was in regards to when we've got a place, whether it's Stranraer, East Riggs, Annan or Lockaway, wherever it may be, when you've got a settlement boundary when you've got a site that is adjacent to a settlement boundary, could that be looked upon favourably? And the question I got back, and it's an audio record, was yes, it could be. And we do in fact have this here when you look at this. There is a site visit that I'm not privy to next week in regards to the poultry. Another case, whether it's poultry, whether it's cattle, not that far away from this point over by Glen Luce. We refused a site recently in regards to a cattle shed, which was controversial as well because of the close proximity of that cattle shed.
Proposing a site visit, Ian?
I was after, well, I mean, a site visit, I'd be happy with a site visit. Someone's got to go that, but there's a motion on the table. I don't know how that would work procedurally. But I'm certainly, as it stands, taking into consider the actual information here, I'll put forward a site visit and see how that goes. And if it doesn't, if we don't get a site visit, then I'll go back to my conclusions.
Can I just clarify matters very quickly? Just with Councillor Geddes, I understand Councillor Dick moved for the applications to be granted. Councillor Geddes, were you seconding that?
Yes.
Therefore, we have a motion to... yeah.
Have you got a seconder for a site visit, Ian? Peter Diggle. I'll propose that we don't have a site visit. Jane?
Have you got a seconder for that?
For what?
Is that right? Well, I'm proposing we don't.
No, we've not got a seconder for refusal of a site visit.
Okay. We have a motion by Councillor Carruthers and seconded by Councillor Diggle to attend a site visit in relation to this application. And we have an amendment by Councillor Martin, seconded by Councillor Maitland to not go on a site visit. Councillor Martin?
Amendment.
Councillor Dempster?
Amendment.
Councillor Blake?
Amendment.
Councillor Carruthers?
Motion.
Councillor Dick?
Motion.
Councillor Diggle? Councillor Drybrow?
Amendment.
Councillor Ferguson?
Motion.
Councillor Geddes?
Motion.
Councillor Groom?
Motion.
Councillor Hislop?
Amendment.
Councillor Maitland?
Amendment.
Councillor McCautry?
Amendment.
Councillor McComb?
Motion.
Councillor McCutcheon?
Motion.
Councillor McKee?
Amendment.
Councillor Thompson?
Motion.
And Councillor Witts.
Motion.
With 10 votes to the motion and 8 votes to the amendment, a site visit will be undertaken for this. Thank you.
Right. What? Got a chicken run next week, Can we go to item 11, please, on the agenda? Erection of 2 bus shelters at the B727S Public Road, adjacent to Rutherford Hall and public car park, Gatehouse of Fleet. Reference number 14/B/2/0477. And I think David's got to speak on this one.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, this is one that's before you simply because it's a council application. Sites in the centre of Gatehouse of Fleet. The 2 red marks are bus shelters. That's a rough indication of what they would look like. This one, proposed ones would be slightly smaller. It doesn't come with the occupant now. This is the actual site. It's just beside the Rutherford Hall, where you're going to be replacing the existing one. The tree will be trimmed back to get that one with a pitched roof in, obviously. That's looking as you're going out of Gatehouse. So you can see it's not impinging on the footway, looking back towards Gatehouse. And there's a bus, so they do operate. That's looking across the road to where the proposed one would be. There's a slight depression in the land there, which would be built up with the bus shelter being built on that, so it wouldn't obstruct the footway, and that's looking towards the centre. the recommendation is unconditional approval.
Members?
Agree to the recommendation, Chair.
If only we were all like that.
Jane?
I want to know why it's black. I mean, why make it black? Why not make it green, like they all have been? They're so much better. Look, green, it's green. Should have been green.
Just to confirm that that application has been approved unconditionally as detailed in the report. Thank you.